When I lifted the phone to ask my son Martin what time his wedding would be, my daughter-in-law, Diana, looked me straight in the eye and said with an icy smile, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." The words hit me like a bucket of cold water. Special people. I, who for 3 years had paid their $500 rent every single month, who had bought every piece of furniture in their house, who had filled their refrigerator when they didn't even have enough to eat, I was not a special person. I stood there in my own living room, holding the phone as if it weighed 1,000 pounds, watching my son avoid my gaze while Diana settled comfortably on the sofa I had bought for them. The pink dress I had chosen for his wedding hung uselessly in my closet, along with the new shoes and the dream of being part of the most important day in my only son's life. I had spent $200 on that dress, imagining how beautiful I would look in Martin's wedding photos. Photos in which I would never appear. For weeks, I had been planning every detail. I had set aside an extra $1,000 to give them as a wedding gift. I had called my sister in Mexico to share the good news. I had cleaned my house from top to bottom, thinking they might come to celebrate with me after the ceremony. All of it crumbled in an instant with those 4 poisoned words, "Only special people." Martin finally looked up and said in a rehearsed voice, "Mum, it was something intimate, very small. Just the 2 of us and the witnesses." But I knew it was a lie. I saw the pictures on social media. I saw Diana's parents posing proudly next to the newlyweds. I saw her siblings toasting with champagne. I saw Diana's white dress, which I had helped pay for with the $700 I gave her for personal expenses last month. I saw everything I wasn't invited to see. A week later, exactly 7 days after that humiliation, Diana called me with a completely different tone. She was no longer the confident woman who had excluded me. Now she sounded desperate, almost pleading. "Dulce, the rent is late. The landlord is pressuring us and says if we don't pay this week, he's going to evict us. Did you forget to make the transfer?" Her voice trembled slightly, as if her world were collapsing. I remained silent for a few seconds, remembering all the times I had rushed to the bank to make the transfer, all the times I had cancelled my own plans to ensure they had a roof over their heads, all the times I had eaten beans and rice so I could give them money for their cravings. And now, after shutting me out of the most important moment of their lives, they had the nerve to call as if nothing had happened. "Diana," I said, with a calmness that surprised even me, "I didn't realize I had to tell you. I only help special people." The silence on the other end of the line was so deep I could hear my own heart beating. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one trembling. She was. "Dulce, I don't understand," she stammered. "We've always been special to you. You're like a second mother to me." Lies. All of them wrapped in that sweet voice she only used when she needed something. The same voice she had used to ask for money for the wedding dress, for the honeymoon, for the rings that I helped finance without knowing I would never see the ceremony where they were exchanged. For so many years, I had lived with this constant feeling of walking on eggshells, measuring every word, every gesture, every gift, hoping to receive a crumb of affection from my own son. I had been the perfect mother, the compliant mother-in-law, the silent provider who never protested when I was treated as if I were invisible. But that phrase, "only special people," awakened something in me that had been dormant for far too long. I mentally calculated how much money I had spent on them over the last 3 years. Between rent, food, gifts, emergencies, and whims, it was over $20,000. Money I had taken from my pension, from my savings, from the money my late husband left for me to live peacefully in my final years. And for what? To be treated like a stranger on my own son's wedding day. That night, after hanging up the phone, I sat on my bed and cried. But they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of rage, of accumulated frustration, of years of humiliation swallowed in silence. I cried for all the times they made me feel that my love was a burden, that my presence was a nuisance, that my money was the only valuable thing I had to offer. I cried for the foolish mother I had been, for the woman who had lost herself trying to be indispensable to those who considered her disposable. When I woke up the next morning, something had changed within me. It wasn't just the pain of betrayal, it was something deeper, colder. I got out of bed and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The same tired eyes, the same wrinkles that told stories of years of giving love without receiving it in return. But there was something different in my gaze, a hardness I didn't recognize, a determination that had been buried under years of compliance. I went to the kitchen and made coffee, just like every morning for the last 40 years. But this time, I didn't think about calling Martin to ask how he was. I didn't check my phone hoping for a message from him, apologizing for the humiliation. For the first time in a long time, my first concern of the day was myself. I sat at the table where I had so often planned surprises for them, where I had counted bills for their expenses, where I had cried silently when they treated me with indifference. Now, that table would witness something completely different. I took out my checkbook and my bank statements and started doing the math. I wanted to see, in exact numbers, the size of my own stupidity. Monthly rent, $500 for 36 months, $18,000. Food and groceries, approximately $200 a month, another $7,200. Birthdays, Christmas, anniversaries, at least $3,000. Diana's medical emergencies, $800. The car loan they never paid back, $2,500. The air conditioner repair for their apartment, $700. The living room furniture, $1,200. The grand total was $33,400. That was the price of my generosity. $33,400 wasted, taken from my husband's inheritance, my pension, my life savings, all thrown away to keep two comfortable adults who couldn't even feign respect for me. The phone rang, and I saw Martin's name on the screen. Normally, I would have rushed to answer, my heart pounding, hoping he would finally apologize. But this time, I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. It finally stopped, and I kept drinking my coffee as if nothing had happened. 10 minutes later, it rang again. This time it was Diana. I let it ring. Then a text from Martin arrived. "Mum, answer the phone. We need to talk to you urgently." I deleted the message without replying. At 2 in the afternoon, I decided to go for a walk. I hadn't done that in months without a specific purpose related to them. It was always to the bank for a transfer, the supermarket for something they needed, or the pharmacy for Diana's medicine. Today, I walked just because I wanted to. I passed the park where I used to take Martin as a child. I remembered that sweet boy who would hug me tight and tell me I was the best mum in the world. When did he become this man who treated me like an ATM with feelings? When did I start confusing love with money? I stopped in front of the bank, the same place I had made so many automatic transfers. The manager, Carlos Mendoza, saw me through the glass and waved. He had processed every single one of my transfers to Martin and Diana. He had watched my account empty month after month to fill theirs. I walked straight into his office. "Don Carlos," I said, "I need to cancel all the automatic transfers I have scheduled." He looked surprised. For 3 years, those transfers had been as regular as the sunrise. "Are you sure, Dona Dulce? Did something happen?" His concern felt genuine, more genuine than any interest Martin had shown in me for months. "What happened is that I finally opened my eyes," I replied. "I want to cancel everything, and I also want information on how to protect my accounts. I don't want anyone else to have access to my money." While Carlos processed the cancellations, my phone buzzed non-stop. Martin, Diana, Martin again. It was as if they had a radar for when their source of income was in jeopardy. I turned the phone off completely. "Dona Dulce," Carlos said as he handed me the papers, "forgive me for prying, but I've seen how generous you've been with your family over the years. I hope they aren't pressuring you to make these changes." His words touched me. This man, who barely knew me beyond banking transactions, showed more real concern for my well-being than my own son. "They aren't pressuring me, Don Carlos. On the contrary, I've finally stopped pressuring myself. When I left the bank, I felt strangely light, as if I had left a huge weight in that office. For the first time in years, my money was completely my own. I had no financial obligations to people who saw me as a resource instead of a human being." On my way home, I thought about all the things I had given up to please Martin and Diana. The trips I didn't take to save money for them, the friends I stopped seeing because I was always available for their emergencies, the hobbies I abandoned because every dollar I spent on myself was a dollar less for their needs. When I arrived, I found 3 cars parked in front of my house, Martin's, Diana's, and one I didn't recognize. I could see movement inside through the windows. My blood ran cold. They had keys. I had given them keys because I trusted them, because I thought one day they would care for me as I had cared for them. I took a deep breath before opening the door. It was time for the first real confrontation of my new life. I opened the door to a scene I will never forget. Martin was on my sofa with his head in his hands. Diana was pacing like a caged animal, and an older man I didn't know was looking through papers on my dining room table. "My papers. My personal documents. What is going on here?" I asked, my voice louder than I expected. All 3 of them looked at me as if I were the intruder. Diana spoke first, her voice filled with that desperate urgency I'd heard on the phone. "Dulce, thank God you're here. We need to talk. Mr. Ramirez is from the law firm we consulted about your situation." "My situation?" The question left my mouth with a surprising calm. "What situation? I'm perfectly fine." Martin finally lifted his head, his eyes reflecting not innocence but financial panic. "Mum, we went to the bank. They told us you cancelled all the transfers. Don Carlos explained you also blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why you did that." Mr. Ramirez, a man in his 50s with a grey suit and an untrustworthy smile, approached me with his hand extended. Mrs. Dulce, I'm Fernando Ramirez, a lawyer specializing in family law. Your children are concerned about your mental well-being and asked me to evaluate the situation. I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I walked to my dining table and gathered all my documents. These are my private papers. You have no right to look through them without my permission. Mum, Martin intervened, with the condescending tone he had perfected. We're worried about you. Your behavior has been very strange lately. First, you cut us off financially without explanation, then you don't answer our calls. We think you might need professional help. Diana came closer and tried to take my hand with the false tenderness she reserved for when she needed something. Dulce, honey, we know you've been under a lot of stress. Maybe the loneliness is affecting you more than you think. It's normal at your age to have episodes of confusion. The word confusion rang like an alarm bell. I understood now why they brought the lawyer. It wasn't to help me, it was to declare me mentally incompetent and take control of my finances. The same woman who told me only special people were invited to her wedding was now treating me like a senile old woman. I am not confused, I said, with a firmness that silenced them all. I am more lucid than I have been in years, and you are all going to get out of my house right now. Mr. Ramirez stepped in with that professional voice lawyers use to sound reasonable. Mrs. Dulce, I understand you feel overwhelmed, but your children have a legal right to intervene if they believe your ability to make financial decisions is compromised. They have documented several concerning behaviors. Concerning behaviors? A harsh, almost cruel laugh escaped my throat. Like deciding my money is my own? Like choosing not to finance the lives of two adults who treat me like dirt? Diana jumped as if I'd slapped her. We've never treated you badly. You're part of our family. Everything you have will be ours someday anyway. We're just speeding up the process. There it was, the naked, raw truth. In their minds, I was already dead, and they were just collecting their inheritance in advance. It didn't matter if I had 70 years or 70 days left to live. To them, I was just a bank account with legs that had become problematic. Out, I said, pointing to the door. All three of you, out of my house. Martin stood up, his face contorted in a childish tantrum. Mum, we can't just leave. We have responsibilities. The rent, the car payments, the credit card you co-signed for. You can't just cut us off from one day to the next. I can't? My voice rose for the first time. Who says I can't? For 3 years, I've paid rent on a lease that isn't even in my name. I've filled a refrigerator in a house where I'm not welcome. I have financed a life that clearly has no room for me. Mr. Ramirez placed a folder from his briefcase on my table. Mrs. Dulce, we've prepared some documents that could facilitate this transition. A power of attorney that would allow Martin and Diana to manage your finances more efficiently. It would be temporary, just until you feel better. I took the folder and threw it directly into the trash without opening it. The only transition happening here is yours, out the front door. Diana started to cry, but they were tears of frustration and rage. You can't do this to us, Dulce. We were counting on you. We made plans based on your support. We bought things, made financial commitments, because we knew we could count on you. Commitments based on my money, I retorted. Not on my well-being, not on my happiness, not on my company. Just my money. And now that I've decided my money is better used in my own life, suddenly I'm a confused old woman who needs legal supervision. Martin tried to approach me, but I stepped back. He was no longer the little boy who ran into my arms during a nightmare. He was a 35-year-old man who saw his mother as an obstacle between him and a comfortable, financed life. Mum, we made mistakes, he said, his voice trying to sound repentant. The wedding was a misunderstanding. Diana was nervous. I was under pressure. We can fix this if you'll just be reasonable. Reasonable. The word tasted bitter. Being reasonable meant continuing to pay for their lives while they treated me like a stranger. It meant pretending it didn't hurt to be excluded from the most important day of my only son's life. Mr. Ramirez gathered his papers. Mrs. Dulce, this doesn't end here. Your family has legal options. If you are truly making irrational decisions due to mental health issues, a judge can determine that you need supervision. His words were a physical blow. This wasn't just a manipulative family visit, it was a real legal threat. They wanted to declare me incompetent. Mr. Ramirez, I said, looking him dead in the eye, I suggest you do your research before threatening a 69-year-old woman who has managed her finances impeccably for 40 years, who raised a son alone after being widowed, who maintained a home, worked until she retired honorably, and who, until last week, was financially supporting 2 fully capable adults. Diana's crying stopped, replaced by a coldness that finally showed her true face. This isn't over, Dulce. We have rights, and we have lawyers. Perfect, I replied. Hire all the lawyers you want. With your own money, of course. Because mine is no longer available to finance your legal tantrums. The 3 of them walked toward the door. Before leaving, Martin turned to me one last time. "Mum, this is going to end very badly for you. You're going to end up alone, with no one to take care of you when you really need it." "Martin," I said, with deep sadness but also crystal clarity, "I'm already alone. The difference is, now it's by my own choice, not by your neglect." When the door closed behind them, I stood in my living room, surrounded by the most beautiful silence I had heard in years. It was the silence of freedom. That night, I couldn't sleep, but it wasn't from sadness or regret. It was the adrenaline of having reclaimed my life. I lay awake, planning my next moves like a general preparing for battle. If Martin and Diana wanted a fight, I would give him a war, but I would fight it with intelligence, not emotion. At 6 a.m., I was dressed and ready. My first stop was the office of Carlos Herrera, a lawyer I'd known for years. Unlike Mr. Ramirez, Carlos had an impeccable reputation for protecting the rights of seniors. "Dona Dulce," he said after I explained the situation, "what your children attempted yesterday is called elder financial abuse, and it's a federal crime. The fact that they entered your home without permission and went through your private documents is also a violation." His words were both a relief and an alarm. A relief because they confirmed I wasn't crazy, and an alarm because the situation was more serious than I thought. We spent 3 hours reviewing my financial records. Carlos whistled when he saw the total. "Dona Dulce, with this money, you could have traveled, you could have enjoyed your retirement. Instead, you fully financed the lives of 2 adults who didn't even respect you enough to invite you to their wedding." When I left his office, I had a plan. First, change all the locks. Second, install a security system with cameras. Third, open a new bank account at a different bank. And fourth, start living the life I had been postponing for years. My next stop was the hardware store. The owner, Don Raul, knew me from all the times I'd bought supplies to fix things at Martin and Diana's apartment. "Dona Dulce," he asked, "another emergency at your son's house?" "No, Don Raul," I said. "This time, it's for my own house. I need to change all the locks, and I want the best quality you have." While he helped me, his son Fabian, who installed security systems, arrived. It was Providence. "Fabian," I said, "I also need security cameras. The whole system. Price is no object." As they prepared everything, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Diana. "Dulce, it's me. Please, don't hang up. We need to talk like civilized adults." "Talk," I said flatly. "Look, I understand you're upset about the wedding. It was a mistake. Martin and I want to make it up to you. How about we plan a special dinner to celebrate our marriage with you? We can do it at your house, cook together like we used to." The manipulation was so obvious it was almost laughable. "Diana, how much do you owe in rent, exactly?" The silence on the other end confirmed I'd hit the mark. Well, it's 2 months. $1,000 total. But that's not the only reason I'm calling, Dulce. We really miss having you in our lives. Do you miss me, or do you miss my money?" I asked directly. "Both," she answered with surprising honesty. "Dulce, I'm not going to lie, we do need your financial help. But we also love you. You're important to us." "If I'm so important," I said, "why wasn't I important enough to be at your wedding? Why am I not important enough to get a call that isn't asking for money? When was the last time you called just to see how I was?" Another silence. We both knew the answer. "Never. Diana, I'm going to explain this to you once. For 3 years, you have treated me like an ATM with feelings. You have used me, ignored me, humiliated me, and finally, insulted me in the worst way possible. Now that the money is gone, you suddenly discover that you love me. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't special enough for your wedding. Now, I'm making mine." I hung up and turned off my phone. That afternoon, I went to a beauty salon for the first time in over a year. "Dona Dulce, my favorite stylist, Cynthia," exclaimed. "What a surprise. I thought you'd forgotten us." "I didn't forget, Cynthia. I just forgot that I deserve to be cared for, too. I got the full treatment, cut, color, manicure, pedicure. For the first time in years, I spent money on myself without feeling guilty." "You look beautiful, Dona Dulce," she said when she was done. "But more than that, you look free." "Yes, Cynthia," I replied. I finally learned to say no. When I got home that evening, a woman was sitting on my front steps. "Dona Dulce?" she asked. "I'm Renata Vasquez. I live next door. We've been neighbors for years but never really talked. I heard loud voices at your house yesterday, and I was worried. Is everything okay?" Her genuine concern touched me. Here was a stranger showing more interest in my well-being than my own son. "Come in, Dona Renata," I said. "Let me make you some coffee, and I'll tell you a story you won't believe." I told her everything. When I finished, her eyes were filled with tears. "Dona Dulce," she said, "you did the right thing. I went through something similar with my daughter 5 years ago. I also thought it was my obligation to finance her adult life. I also believed that if I didn't give them money, they wouldn't love me. What happened? I cut them off, she said. At first, it was terrible. They threatened me, emotionally blackmailed me, tried to make me feel guilty. But after 6 months, my daughter called to apologize, for real. Now we have a genuine relationship based on love, not money. Her words gave me hope. The next day, Fabian and Don Raul came to change the locks and install the security system. As they worked, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years, call my sister, Diana, in Mexico. I told her the whole story. When I finished, she said, "Dulce, it's about time." It broke my heart every time we talked and you bragged about how much money you gave them as if love were measured in dollars. Martin never spoke of you with affection. It was always, "My mum helped me with this," or "My mum bought me that," but never, "I miss my mum," or "I love my mum." It was like you were a service, not a person. Her words hurt, but it was a necessary pain, like cleaning an infected wound. You know what else? Diana continued. Diana always talked about you in the future tense. When Dulce is gone, we can remodel her house, or, when we inherit, we'll invest in the business. It was as if they were just waiting for you to die to start really living. That revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. They didn't just see me as an ATM, but as a temporary obstacle. That evening, I visited my husband's grave for the first time in ages. I sat by his headstone and spoke to him. "Roberto, my love, I think I got lost for a while. After you left, I put all my energy into Martin. I wanted to be the best mother in the world, to make up for him growing up without a father. But in the process, I forgot to be myself. The money you left for me to live comfortably, I spent it on them. But not anymore, my love. I've learned." When I returned home, Martin and Diana were there again, this time with 2 other people. I didn't get out of the car. Instead, I called my lawyer. "Carlos, they're at my house again. Stay in the car, Dona Dulce. I'm on my way, and I'm calling the police." After our talk yesterday, I filed for a temporary restraining order. "They are not allowed on your property." 15 minutes later, Carlos and 2 police cars arrived. "Mum, this is ridiculous," Martin yelled from the street. "You can't call the police on your own son." "Martin," I replied calmly, "family doesn't threaten you with competency hearings. Family doesn't enter your house without permission. Family doesn't treat their mothers like ATMs. They were forced to leave." That night, Renata invited me for dinner. I met her daughter, and I saw what a healthy family relationship looked like. It was built on respect and genuine care, not transactions. The following weeks were quiet, though the cameras showed Martin and Diana driving by my house several times a day. Then, one morning, a social worker named Raquel Mendez showed up at my door. "We received a report that you may be at risk," she said. "We need to do a wellness check." Martin and Diana had escalated things, involving the government. "I'd like to call my lawyer," I said, my voice steady. Raquel tried to dismiss it as a simple conversation, but I held firm. Carlos arrived in 20 minutes and immediately took control, presenting her with all the documentation of financial abuse. Raquel reviewed the papers, her professional demeanor faltering. It was clear the story she'd been told didn't match the evidence. "Mrs. Dulce," she finally asked, "can you explain why you decided to cut off financial support to your son so abruptly?" "Because I realized they were using me," I said simply. "Because I was tired of financing the lives of people who saw me as a nuisance." After a few more questions about my health and finances, which I answered clearly, Raquel closed her file. "Mrs. Dulce, based on this conversation and the documentation, I see no evidence that you are at risk or in need of intervention. I will be closing this case." 2 weeks later, they tried again. This time, a man identifying himself as a geriatric psychiatrist, Dr. Ricardo Vega, appeared at my door, hired by my concerned family. I refused his evaluation, and once again, Carlos had to call the police to enforce the restraining order. It was becoming clear that they would stop at nothing. Finally, the inevitable happened. Carlos arrived one morning with a grim expression. "Dulce, they've filed a formal petition for guardianship in family court. They're asking a judge to declare you mentally incompetent and appoint a legal guardian. My own son was trying to have me declared legally insane to steal my money." The day of the trial arrived. I saw Martin and Diana in the hallway. He wouldn't meet my eyes, but she stared at me with pure, cold calculation. Their lawyer painted me as a confused old woman being manipulated by strangers. Diana gave an Oscar-worthy performance on the stand, crying about how my mental deterioration had been devastating. Martin testified that I had become erratic and irrational. But when my lawyer, Carlos, cross-examined them, their stories fell apart. He forced Diana to admit she never called me unless she needed money. He made Martin squirm when asked how much he'd received over 3 years, over $33,000, and how many times he had visited his mother without asking for something. Then it was our turn. My pharmacist testified about how Diana had tricked him into signing a misleading statement. The psychiatrist we hired, Dr. Morales, presented her evaluation, confirming I was not only competent but had excellent cognitive function. The bank manager testified that my financial decisions were perfectly rational. Renata and my friends from the gardening club testified about my lucidity and new zest for life. Finally, I took the stand. I told my story, from the thousands of dollars to the humiliation of the wedding. "Why did you cut him off?" Carlos asked. "Because I finally understood," I said, my voice clear and strong, "that what I received from him wasn't love. It was a business transaction disguised as a family relationship. My money was welcome, but I, as a person, was not." The judge deliberated for 2 hours that felt like an eternity. When he returned, his verdict was clear. "It is evident to this court that Mrs. Dulce Martinez is in full command of her mental faculties," he announced. Furthermore, the evidence suggests this petition was motivated by financial interest rather than genuine concern. The court denies the petition for guardianship completely. I had won. I had won my freedom, my dignity, and my right to live free from abuse. As we left the courthouse, Diana shot me a look of pure hatred. Martin looked at me one last time, and for a second, I saw something that might have been regret, but it was far too late. 3 months later, I sold my house and moved into a beautiful apartment downtown. I donated half my money to organizations that protect seniors from family abuse. With the other half, I started living the life I had always wanted. I traveled to Europe, took art classes, and joined volunteer groups. I never heard from Martin and Diana again, though I heard they had to move into a smaller apartment and that Diana got a job for the first time in years. Some nights, as I look at the stars from my new balcony, I think of the woman I was a year ago, fearful, manipulated, believing I had to buy love. That woman is gone. In her place is someone who understands a fundamental truth: real love never has a price tag, and your freedom is priceless. My name is Dulce, I am 70 years old, and I finally learned that the most important person I have to love and protect is myself.